You know when you're craving something warm and creamy, like totally comforting, but you want it to be keto friendly?
Oh, yeah.
It feels like half the battle on keto is finding sauces that actually taste as good as they are. Good for you.
It's so true. It's a real challenge because, like so many sauces, right? They rely on flour or sugar to get that texture and the flavor.
Exactly. And that's what blew my mind about this recipe, this keto creamy chicken with sun-dried tomato sauce.
Yeah.
Because it's like restaurant level delicious, but they use all these smart swaps to keep it totally keto.
And it's amazing how they get that, like, depth of flavor, And it all starts with searing the chicken perfectly.
Okay, so searing chicken. I have to admit, I've always struggled with dried chicken. Is searing really like the magic trick to avoid that?
It really is. And it's not just about getting that nice color on the outside, although that definitely helps. Searing, it actually creates a chemical reaction. It's called the Maillard reaction.
The what now? That sounds very
Mhm.
scientific.
It is, but basically it's just a reaction that happens between amino acids and sugars, when you're cooking with high heat.
Okay.
And this reaction creates hundreds of new flavor compounds. It adds this layers of complexity that you just can't get from anything else.
So it's like chemistry class, but way more delicious.
Exactly. And when you sear the chicken first, you're locking in all those juices, so what you end up with is this incredibly tender and flavorful chicken.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so you sear the chicken, but then the recipe says to simmer it in the sauce, right? What's the reason for that?
That's all about infusing even more flavor into the chicken. While it simmers, it's like it's soaking up all the deliciousness from the sun-dried tomato sauce.
Okay, so we have this perfectly seared chicken that deserves an equally amazing sauce. Tell me all about these sun-dried tomatoes.
Oh my gosh, just picture this. Rich, tangy, sun-dried tomatoes, slowly simmered with garlic and herbs.
Okay, stop. You're making me hungry. But real quick, why slow cook them? Can't you just throw everything in the pan and call it a day?
Well, yeah, you could, but you wouldn't get that same flavor. Slow cooking the garlic and those sun-dried tomatoes lets their flavors really deepen and kind of blend together.
Okay.
It goes back to that Maillard reaction we talked about. But it also, it allows the natural sugars in the tomatoes to caramelize, and that creates this incredible sweetness to balance out the tanginess.
Okay, so there's a method to the madness here. I'm sensing a theme. And there's that magic word again, caramelize. I swear every time I hear caramelize, I know something delicious is about to happen.
Right. It's like the magic word for cooking.
Totally. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. You say keto creamy chicken. How is that even possible? How do you get that creamy texture without using tons of carbs?
And that's what's so cool about this recipe. It uses heavy cream and Parmesan cheese.
Okay, two of my favorite things. Tell me more.
So heavy cream, obviously that gives you that richness, that creaminess we want. But the Parmesan cheese, that's the real MVP here. Not only does it add another layer of flavor, that sharp, nutty flavor, but it makes the sauce thicker without having to use flour or any of those other high-carb thickeners.
It's like a double whammy. Amazing flavor, and it's functional.
Right.
The person who came up with this recipe is a genius.
For real. And here's a little detail I really like. The recipe says to use a meat thermometer to make sure that chicken gets to 165 degrees.
Food safety first. But I'll be honest, you usually just cut into the chicken to see if it's done.
Yeah.
Which, now that I'm saying it out loud, probably messes with all those juices we're trying to keep in there.
It happens. But a thermometer, that takes all the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
And when you use that with the searing and the simmering we talked about, you're basically guaranteeing that that chicken is going to be safe to eat, but also crazy tender and juicy every time.
No more dry chicken. You're speaking my language.
Exactly. And to make it a totally keto-friendly meal, the recipe says to serve it with zucchini noodles or cauliflower rice, so you have that lighter side to balance out the richness of the chicken and the sauce.
I love how adaptable this recipe is.
Yeah.
Speaking of, do you think you could swap the heavy cream for something plant-based? For people who don't eat dairy but still want to try it out?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Because, there's so many people who are dairy-free these days.
Yeah. And I think you definitely could.
Yeah.
You could definitely swap the heavy cream out for something plant-based.
Yep.
Like a good quality plant-based cream.
Yeah.
Just be careful about the flavor because
Yeah.
some of the plant-based creams can be a little sweeter
Right.
than regular dairy cream. So you might have to change up the seasoning a bit.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's instead of just following the recipe exactly,
Right.
you really want to understand why they're using each ingredient
Totally.
and how that affects the final dish.
Exactly. Once you get that, then
Yeah.
you can get creative
Yes.
to make it your own.
I love that.
Yeah.
This has been so eye-opening.
I'm glad.
I went from keto creamy chicken, what is that, to I need this in my life immediately.
Right.
So true.
It proves you don't need to spend hours in the kitchen
Yeah.
to make something healthy and delicious.
And it's so comforting, too.
Yes.
You know? Like, that's the thing I love about this recipe.
Absolutely.
Is that it takes classic comfort food
Yes.
and makes it keto.
Exactly.
So for our listeners out there who are totally inspired and want to try this recipe,
Yes.
what's the one thing you want them to remember?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is that keto cooking doesn't have to be limiting or boring.
Yes.
Like, with just a little creativity and knowing some basics about cooking, you can have amazing meals that taste good and are good for you.
So well said.
Thank you.
And hey, maybe you'll find your new favorite dish just by playing around with this keto creamy chicken with sun-dried tomato sauce.
That's the best part.
Until next time, happy cooking, everyone.